this absolutely weird quick story from a time when I went camping alone. I know it's not exactly the safest thing you can do, but I used to do it a lot, and honestly, I still do. However, this one incident made me take a break from camping solo for a while, and even now it still creeps me out whenever I think about it. So, I was off the beaten path on a trail that I had mapped out myself in the Adirondacks. I had spent time in that area before, just reading, relaxing, and chilling, although I hadn't been there for a couple of years. This time, I was already 2 days into what would be a 3-day trek to reach my usual camping spot. Along the way, I started noticing some pretty strange things. Specifically, there were a bunch of trees covered in holes. At first, I thought maybe hunters had been using them for target practice. That seemed like a reasonable explanation. Even though it wasn't really a hunting area, I figured maybe some local kids had come out there and were just shooting at the trees for fun. But when I got closer and really examined the holes, they didn't look like bullet holes at all. There was no splintering, and the bark around them wasn't broken up the way you'd expect. Instead, it looked like the holes had been drilled. I remembered watching a YouTube documentary about a farm in Canada that makes maple syrup, and it reminded me of how trees get tapped for that process. Still, I was pretty sure these weren't syrup trees, and they didn't even look like maples. They were leaking sap, but it wasn't anything like sweet syrup. It was just normal foul-smelling tree sap that had dried up in some of the holes. The deeper I went toward my camping spot, the more trees I saw with these drilled holes, and it honestly confused me. I started wondering if it was some kind of woodpecker or maybe some unknown creature. The strange thing was, the further into the woods I went, the fresher the holes seemed. Some of them were still leaking sap, and the smell was absolutely awful. I didn't really know much about trees or nature in general, but these trees had a horrible odor. The best way I can describe it is like when you mow your lawn and leave the cut grass sitting for too long, and it starts to smell bad. Then imagine mixing that with wet bark, and maybe some leftover food, like compost. That's what it smelled like, but even more sour and tangy. Definitely nothing like maple syrup. Against my better judgment, I touched some of the sap with my finger and tasted just a tiny bit, and it was disgusting. Seriously, nobody would be collecting that stuff to eat, or so I thought. Turns out, I was wrong. As I kept moving through the trees, I suddenly saw a man. He was standing there, drilling into a tree, using what looked like a hand-operated drill. He hadn't noticed me, so I crouched down behind a tree and watched him carefully. The guy drilled into the tree and then leaned in and started sucking the sap directly out of it. After he pulled in a mouthful, he threw his head back and made this nasty lip-smacking sound. It honestly made me feel sick, especially knowing how horrible that sap tasted. If he hadn't been wearing clothes and using a human tool, I would have thought I'd stumbled across some kind of creature, like a Sasquatch or something. He was huge, tall, hairy, and literally sucking on a tree. That is not normal human behavior. So obviously, I wanted nothing to do with this guy. I just wanted to quietly sneak away and get as far from him as possible. But yeah, things didn't go that way. I tried to move as quietly and carefully as I could, but almost immediately, I stepped on a stick. And in that silent forest, it cracked so loudly, it sounded like an explosion. The moment that happened, I heard heavy, thundering footsteps. I turned, just in time to see the guy charging straight at me. He looked furious, like he was enraged that I had been watching him. And yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous describing a guy drilling trees and drinking sap, but trust me, it was not funny at all in that moment. Having a massive, angry man running at you in the middle of nowhere is terrifying. He was even swinging that drill above his head as he ran, and all I could focus on was the handle spinning around. Thankfully, I snapped out of my shock quickly and started running. The guy was big and intimidating, but he was also slower, and I was younger and in better shape. I ran as fast as I could. After what felt like hours of running with my heart pounding out of my chest, I was finally confident that I had lost him. At some point, I had veered off onto a different route, and I stopped seeing the drilled trees, which made me feel a little safer. It felt like I had entered an area that the guy didn't know. I pushed myself hard, and eventually made it back towards civilization and reached my car. Along the way, I even took a couple of quick naps in ditches because I didn't want to waste time setting up a tent or doing anything that could slow me down. It was honestly one of the most miserable and terrifying experiences I've ever had. Later, when I got closer to my car, I started seeing more trees with drilled holes again, which immediately put me back on edge. But thankfully, that sap-sucking guy never showed up again. I finally made it back to my car and got out of there as fast as I could. And I've never gone back to that area since, which I think is completely understandable. To this day, I have no idea what that guy would have done if he had caught me. And I definitely have no intention of going back there to find out why he was doing what he was doing in the first place.